Welcome to all of you. This is our quarterly Arts Action Fund political insider briefing. We like to do this in a quick fire Q&A format with some good opening remarks. I'm Nina Oslu-Tunjli, the Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund. And with me today is Lyndon Boozer, who is the Chairman of the Arts Action Fund Board's Political Action Committee. And he is a partner at Capitol Council here in Washington, D.C. As I mentioned, we do like a lot of questions, so I want to encourage you to use the chat room function and to quickly, post generally what your question is. And I'm going to try to get to as many as I possibly can today after I ask Lyndon a couple of questions. And we're focused on politically and legislatively what's happening at a national level in the country. And with that, I am going to begin, Lyndon, by asking you, we're all reading the headlines for the last 2 weeks about what's happening in the presidential race. And we'd love to get your insider thoughts on what's happening, what could happen. This is an opinion only because you're forecasting into the future and talking about what you're hearing on the ground. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Nina. Hello, everyone. We have over 1,000 folks on the call, so I really appreciate your being here. And Nina, thank you for your leadership. I do want to make a plug before I get started for the Action Fund PAC, because the PAC, which a lot of you do support, supports members of Congress and candidates who support the arts. And so there's no amount too small to donate to the Arts Action Fund. It's how we're able to elect legislators who support arts funding and arts public policy. And that's very important. It's one of the reasons why I'm engaged with Americans for the Arts Action Fund. Boy, Nina, I mean, I can't keep up with what's going on. The latest salvo was from George Clooney and the op-ed that he wrote to the New York Times. I mean, I really thought things had bottomed out for the president when the Black Caucus came to his rescue on Monday and Tuesday, with even Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the party, saying he supports Joe Biden. Benny Thompson going on CNN, who chaired the convention 4 years ago, and the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford from Nevada, stating his unequivocal support for Joe Biden. Other quotes like from Hank Johnson in Georgia, "We support our elders, and so we're sticking with Joe Biden." My friend Marcus Mason with the Congressional Black Caucus Super PAC, he said, "I'd rather have Joe Biden in a wheelchair than Donald Trump in a golf cart." That was a pretty funny quote. But if you're asking me to prognosticate and predict, I've been in this business pretty much since I was born. As you know, my mother worked for Lyndon Johnson. And so I was born here in Washington and grew up in his shadow. And one thing about politics I've learned, it's unpredictable. No one expected LBJ not to run, and he didn't. And Joe Biden right now is running full steam ahead, but that could change. I think you're seeing some polls now that are reflective of the challenges he faces against Mr. Trump. And next week is going to be Mr. Trump's week as he nominates presidential candidate. We don't know who that's going to be. There's a short list of Marco Rubio, Governor Bergman, J.D. Vance, Tim Scott, are kind of the top line members who are being considered. But I think the president really just needs to get through this week. And this is a very important week. It's the 75th anniversary of NATO. And a lot of foreign office heads are in Washington, D.C. I almost missed this call because of the traffic. It's a really important week for the international community. And Mr. Biden spoke to the NATO leaders yesterday via teleprompter, of course, in person, and that went fine. But he has a press conference on Thursday. And the media is just parsing every single word and every single move by President Biden. And so this freewheeling press conference on Thursday, I don't know how long it will be, but it will be, long enough for us to tell whether, he's 100% in charge or, has some slip ups or some gaffes. And who knows what it'll take. I mean, Mr. Clyburn, congressman from South Carolina, who helped nominate Mr. Biden and helped elect him with a lot of the black vote, suggested the debate gaffe, but the debate wasn't a gaffe. The debate performance was strike one. And for Mr. Biden, for Mr. Clyburn to say that was strike one, that was pretty significant. As I said, the Black Caucus is 60 members strong. The Hispanic Caucus on the Democratic side is over 40 members. That's over 100 members. And the Democratic Caucus, as most of you know, is about 210 members. So half the Democratic Caucus is Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Now, about 10 members have come out in the House and asked Mr. Biden to step down. Most of those are white males, although two females, Nikki Sherrill from New Jersey, who's going to run for re-election, but also is running for governor, and Angie Craig from Minnesota has asked for him to step down. And some of the frontline members, there's 28 House Democrats that are considered frontline, which means translation, competitive seats. And so those 28 members they're very nervous. They're watching the polls. They don't want to be dragged down by the president, and his numbers are in the 30s in terms of approval. The senators are very concerned. You're seeing some senators come out. Mike Bennett, Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, and others have voiced some concern about Mr. Biden because the Senate's at stake too. I mean, it's theoretical that Sherrod Brown could offset Trump's predicted victory in Ohio, and possibly with the union support, pull out Ohio. It's long shot, but Sherrod's done it before. And John Tester in Montana could win Montana because he's a farmer, a popular senator in his home state. And if those two seats are held by Sherrod Brown and John Tester, West Virginia is in the Republican column now because Joe Manchin's not running. You would have a 50-50 Senate, and then it would be the president's party that would determine the 51st vote and who's in the majority. And most folks have thought up until the debate, it would probably be Joe Biden. And so the Democrats could actually hold on to the Senate with the 50-50 Senate and Joe Biden as president. But right now, I mean, the numbers in Nevada are going down, the numbers in Arizona. Jackie Rosen is in a very competitive seat in Nevada. She's a current senator. Ruben Gallego is running in an open seat in Arizona against Kerry Lake, who's not that popular. But, Biden's numbers are so bad now after this debate that he could pull Ruben Gallego down. It was thought that Ruben Gallego could actually pull Biden over the finish line in Arizona. But really, we're really in the midst of a family, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment where the party is split. You have young progressives like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's very respected, supporting Biden. Congressman Jayapal, who's the head of the Progressive Caucus, supporting Biden. And that's surprising because, the progressives have had issues with Biden. Bernie Sanders supporting Biden, and other centrists, concerned about Mr. Biden. So, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I would recommend everyone watch this press conference on CNN on Thursday and see how the president performs. But these questions this op-ed by Mr. Clooney and actually Mr. Stephanopoulos' comments, which were probably not helpful to Mr. Biden, were of concern today. So as of yesterday, Nina, I would have told you the president's turned the corner. He has given a speech on Monday at the LBJ Library in Austin, Texas. I'll be there on the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. And of course, his credentials are pretty strong in that area. He served Barack Obama for 8 years. He put a Black woman on the Supreme Court, as he promised he would do. And he also was nominated, several Black leaders in top positions, like at defense and in other cabinet posts. And so this speech is going to be, pretty significant, I think, on the Civil Rights Act during the first day of the Republican convention, when Mr. Trump is to pick his supposedly supposed to pick and announce his vice presidential nominee. So it'll be an interesting split screen experience. With that, is there anything I can add? And I will also just add this. So folks, I am a Democrat, but I'm bipartisan Democrat. That Mr. Trump in the debate, while, there were some concerns about, facts, et cetera, he conducted himself, in a fairly modest manner for Mr. Trump. And I think that helped him. He was humorous. People love humor. I mean, when he said, I don't know what he just said, I don't think he knows what he just said. I mean, people chuckled because it was, sadly true. And so, a lot of America isn't as tuned in to this process like we are, like those of you who are on this call are. And so they don't watch the debates necessarily, but I think they're nervous about it. The delegates so far are sticking with Mr. Biden. They're pledged to him. They were voted as Biden delegates by primary voters like me and you. And so right now, there's a roll call vote that's going to be done by the DNC on August 7th to convert those delegates that are pledged to Biden to Mr. Biden. So if a change was going to be made, it had to be made by August 7th. And you can game it out going backwards. And the president doesn't seem to be wavering, but if these poll numbers continue to go south on him in these key Senate states and the donors clam up, and let me, George Clooney, for those of you who don't know, helped raise $30 million for Mr. Biden with Julia Roberts in Los Angeles. And for him to come out with that stinging op-ed, just Google George Clooney, New York Times, Joe Biden, you'll see it. It was hard hitting. So, I don't know what to think. I don't know where this is headed.
How unusual is it, Lyndon, that they are doing a pre-vote before the delegates for the DNC before they even get to the convention? The convention is August 19th through the 22nd.
Yeah, that's very unusual and a first. It's not been done before. And originally it was done because there was some concern that Ohio legislature might pass some rules to not, permit those delegates, to be assigned at the convention for Mr. Biden. But the governor did sign legislation extending the deadline to the convention. So it really is unnecessary at this point. But the DNC has indicated they're going to move forward without a roll call vote regardless. And I think that's also essentially to speed the process and run out the clock. Because right now for Mr. Biden, once those delegates vote on August 7th, then right now they're pledged, which means if they wanted, they could vote for someone else. But generally, if you're pledged and the people vote for you, fulfill your pledge to vote for that candidate, which is Joe Biden. So I think that really Mr. Biden has to get through this week. Next week is Trump week, and then I'm looking at my calendar here. We basically have August 7th is the next week, is the following week. Actually, we have a couple of weeks before August 7th. So there's all eyes are going to be on Mr. Biden, and heretofore, all eyes have been on Mr. Trump, and that's what Democrats have preferred. The trial, the trials, I should say, and really, Mr. Trump's history as president. And that's where the focus has been, not on Mr. Biden, but now the focus is on his health and his capacity to govern. And that's a real challenge, because as we know from the Rocky Balboa movies, Father Time is undefeated. And, 4 more years, 4 years is a lot. But, again, I spoke to Tommy Quinn, a friend of mine who's the dean of the lobbyist delegation. He's 86. And you know what he said? He goes, Joe's a friend of mine. Tell Joe the next 5 years are the best. That's what Tommy said. He's 86, still going strong, by the way. So, Miss Pelosi's in her 80s. Mr. Clyburn is in his 80s. Mr. Hoyer, and they're still strong, fit as a fiddle. And so, age, as I like to say, is nothing but a number. And so, I respect Mr. Biden for the fight that he has in him, but I think it's really kind of beyond that right now. It's more about capacity. I don't think this question about the cognitive test is going to play out either, because he will only agree to it if Trump would agree to it, and he's not going to agree to it anyway. He's already said he's tested every day as president. But I think you'll see the doctor come out at some point and probably speak to the press. The Republicans are trying to get him to testify on the oversight committee, Mr. Biden's doctor, to speak to his health. But they gave a 6-page report in February on Mr. Biden's health. So this is a huge question mark, and everyone's looking very carefully at every movement and every word that the president utters.
Yeah. In our chat,
100%, and they can vote for him.
In our chat, we have a couple people showing absolute support for Biden with the hashtag riding with Biden. And I don't think any of your comments are showing your opinion one way or another, but merely reading the tea leaves of what's happening with hallway conversations with members of Congress and what's happening in the news, that it's just a legitimate question, and it's not going one way or another, I think is what we want to at least communicate. Another question that has come up is actually related to the planks. As you know, the Democratic National Convention, the Republican National Convention put out a platform of how Republicans and Democrats will want to govern over the next 4 years. And the question is, will there be an arts plank this year? The RNC did not really solicit opportunities for asking for particular planks. Under the Trump administration, under both times, when he first became president and when he ran for reelection but didn't win, we attempted to get an arts plank, and the Arts Action Fund attempted to get an arts plank in, but it wasn't accepted. It was, and essentially for his reelection, they didn't even update the dates, and they simply made a copy of his original one from 4 years prior, copied it over and saying this is his platform. He didn't care that much about it to even update the dates. Prior to Trump, there had been an arts plank in the RNC's convention. But since Mr. Trump has been running, there has not been. And the RNC just released earlier this week their platform for the next 4 years. And it's essentially all of Mr. Trump's campaign points. And there's really nothing on the arts. The only thing that just comes close is a little bit on education, and him asking for a return and a commitment to liberal arts education, which the arts could fit into that, but it wasn't specifically specified. The DNC is currently in the midst of putting together a platform where they do solicit the public and interest groups for ideas to put into the plank. There has been, and we've been very successful in getting an arts plank in the Democratic National Committee's platform consecutively every 4 years. And we have submitted an official plank that we worked with some arts unions on, Actors Equity, AFL-CIO, Department of Professional Employees, AFL-CIO, IATSE, to do a joint statement together, and that has been submitted. And I think it's getting some steam, and some others are also submitting our plank. So I think we'll end up with something in the DNC. They begin their first meetings for a DNC arts plank, or not just an arts plank, but the entire platform next week. And they will finish and wrap things up by the end of July in terms of their final. So look forward to hearing from us on what we end up with there. And let me just now look at some more questions. I think I answered the arts plank for us. Anything you want to add to that, Lyndon?
Well, someone on the chat, they pop up here on the screen, said finally we get to the arts. So I apologize for belaboring the presidential, but that really is sort of sidetracked everyone. The legislative process is continuing, even though we have these breaks for the conventions and most of August. They marked up the last of the 3 House appropriations bills in full committee today. And the Interior bill, which is where the arts funding is located, did pass and was approved, and will likely go to the floor the week of July 22nd. So, and the arts numbers, I think, in that bill are pretty decent based on the president's budget and the Republicans and Democrats that supported that appropriations bill. So that's good news. The Senate, they're starting approps markups in full committee this week for Milcon, Ag, and Ledge Branch. Interior has not been scheduled for the Senate. So it's possible that could get marked up at the end of July, but that's unlikely. So we're probably looking at the fall. At the end of the day, we'll probably have a continuing resolution, and that essentially kicks the can down the road. And we don't know how long that continuing resolution, which operates the government at the current funding levels, how long that would last. It would probably go obviously through the election and probably into the lame duck. But a lot of it depends on how the election turns out. And now that the Republicans feel like they might do quite well in the election, they may want to extend the continuing resolution until next year. Because if you take over the White House, the Senate, and the House, and right now they were expected to possibly lose the House. It's only a 4-seat differential, and Hakeem Jeffries was predicted to possibly become the speaker, and the Democrats take over. But right now, with these poll numbers, and we're still reading the poll numbers, they're happening day by day. If it looks like the House is in jeopardy, I mean, you'll see more members, asking for Biden to step down. But if the Republicans feel like they're going to be in charge and they're confident, then the continuing resolution won't be voted on until they leave, which is in September. The calendar, for any of you who really want to follow this process, I recommend you download the Dome app on your Android or Apple device. It's just called Dome, D-O-M-E, like the Capitol Dome. It has the schedule of the Congress, the activity on the House floor, what's being voted on, what's up for consideration, how the vote tallies happen on legislation. But they're essentially gone all of August. They come back after Labor Day for a few weeks, and they're gone all of October to campaign. And the election is, the first Tuesday in November. So the continuing resolution would most likely be passed. I doubt these appropriations bills will not be resolved before this Congress adjourns. So I hope that's helpful. But any other questions, Nina, that I can answer? Because I'd love to do my best here to help answer questions people have.
So there's a question about the timing of things. So the fiscal year for the federal government ends September 30th, 2024. So just in a couple of months here. They're going to have to pass that continuing resolution and set a date of when that expiration is. They're not going to know the outcome of that election yet. Your best guess is that they'll send it to the lame duck period, which is post-election, but prior to the new Congress being sworn in January, or you're thinking maybe after they're sworn in January?
It depends on what the numbers look like in September. And if it looks like, somehow maybe Biden pivots to Kamala Harris and she's popular and she puts Roy Cooper on the ticket from North Carolina, 67-year-old reelected governor, who is also a former prosecutor. And suddenly there's all this excitement about the Democratic ticket with Kamala and Dobbs, et cetera. And she somehow, is competitive with Trump. She's certainly more competitive than Biden right now. But, this is a fluid process, so nobody knows. And so September is when that determination for the CR date will be determined. So they'll look at September and see how the Republicans are faring, because they're in charge of the House. And so they'll have to come to an agreement with Schumer in the Senate, with the Democrats, on the length of the continuing resolution of the CR. And so I think that I can't tell you whether that will be into the lame duck or, into next year when the new Congress and the new Senate and the new president are sworn in. That's what we January 4th and January 20th for the president.
January 4th and January 20th. There's a question to make sure they got that website right. You had said Dome Map, and then someone asked, is it Dome Watch?
No, it's just the Dome app. Dome app,
not map.
App.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an app from the App Store.
Okay. DOME, Dome app. Okay, great. Yeah. I'm even learning something, guys. Okay, there was an earlier question when we were talking about presidential candidates of how President Trump, if he were to return and win the election, how would he be on the arts? I'll take a first crack at that, and Lyndon, please add anything. He, as president, was attempting to zero out funding for the arts every year that he was president. He did that consecutively for 4 years. We were able to get something in through COVID funding, but that was one large package, and he couldn't just line item veto something out for the arts, which we had secured. Several hundreds of millions of dollars for the arts and billions for the shuttered venue program. But that was really Congress doing it. And what I love about that moment, even though I hate that a president has attempted to, the first time in my memory, over 30 years, 40 years of a president asking to zero out funding for the arts and humanities, is that it showed how we had a bipartisan base in Congress, which was controlled in the House by Republicans, controlled in the Senate by Republicans when President Trump was attempting to do that. And it's those Republicans combined with the Democrats that not only did not listen to President Trump, but they actually increased funding for the National Endowment for the Arts during that time. Now, a lot has changed, and the politics of the Republican Party has moved further and further to the right. We can't necessarily rely on something like that. We have to fight to make sure that something like that would happen again if we are dealt that hand. Lyndon, do you want to add anything to that point?
Well, I would just say that he did not attend the Ford's Theater Gala, which is a tradition. He did not attend the Kennedy Center Honors galas, which are it was a fundraiser for the Kennedy Center either. So he was not, and I was a Ford's Theater guest of Ovation, the Arts Network, because Ovation supports Ford's Theater. And the honors, I was a guest of Miss Deborah Lee from BET, who was the CEO of BET at the time, Obama's last year. But so Mr. Trump has not supported the arts in the past, but he's a very interesting politician, and he's evolved on certain issues, and to me, you never give up, and you dealt with the cards you're handed, and if he is somehow president, we're back. You just don't know if maybe he'll have a different opinion or consideration for the arts. But I know early in his presidency, he was not, through his actions, by just not attending or supporting. Traditionally, the White House supports a reception at the White House for Ford's Theater when they do their annual fundraiser, which is a coveted invitation to go to the White House reception with the president. And that's how Ford's Theater raises so much money for their theater. But he did not, he did not do that.
And as a reminder, Ford's Theater is the theater that President Lincoln was shot in. We have a question that has been elevated a couple of times. They want us to go a little bit deeper on what the funding situation looks like for the three cultural agencies, National Endowment for the Arts, Humanities, IMLS, for this coming year, which we're talking about appropriations for FY 2025, since FY 2024 has already been resolved. Just as a reminder, we ended 2024 with $207 million each for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. When the president went to make his budget request for what is now FY 25, he requested a small increase to $210 million. For some weird reason, it was a lower increase, not even an increase at all. It was actually a decrease to the NEH at about 200 million, from 207 to 200. We don't agree with that. We think that these are twin agencies that should be appropriated at the same level. And the arts communities ask, in terms of a viable situation, not what we need, but what we think we viably can get. We asked for 211 million for both agencies. So far in the legislative process, as Lyndon mentioned earlier on, in the House, the full appropriations committee has marked up the bill that houses funding for these two agencies, which is the Interior Appropriations Bill. And they gave it and they kind of did it as a favor, to tell you the truth. I'll explain it. There's just a 1.5% cut in the bill for those agencies, bringing it from 207 to about 204 million, around about number right there. And the reason for that cut, and the reason why I kind of call it a little bit of a favor, is that that bill was decimated in terms of the amount of money that they were allocated to fund everything that goes within the interior, which is EPA, forest, and wildlife, and things like that. It was decimated. And for the arts and humanities to not even get a small little cut would have drawn too much attention to Freedom Caucus members of why the arts and humanities were left uncut when all these other programs were cut 40%, 50%. So a 1.5% cut there. But what we're more worried about is a repeat of last year, which is when this bill comes to the floor, which we're looking, Lyndon did some research with his appropriations expert, and we're looking at maybe the week of July 22nd, after they come back from the Republican National Convention. The House will be back in session, and we're thinking the week of July 22nd all the way to the July 31st is a possibility that there will be a couple of floor amendments that Freedom Caucus members will put forward on the House floor to either try to eliminate all funding for the arts and humanities like they did last year, or a portion, maybe a deeper cut, a 50% cut, something like that. And this is where we'll need all of you, all hands on deck. of sending, and we'll send you the information of how to email your members, sample language, to make sure that they vote no against any of these kind of weakening amendments. Look for those emails coming on or before July 22nd. So that we can let you know this is when we need you, because there are questions up, what can we do now? This is what we need to be preparing for now, and being able to hit that button when we need it. I think that we will be able to defend it. What I'm worried about is someone requesting like a 10% cut. That's where we might lose a lot of the Republicans who voted against total elimination of funding, because it's so extreme. But when it's like a 10% cut, I get more worried, because we might lose some Republicans. We won on the House floor vote last year, a lot of Republicans, because it was such an extreme vote of total elimination. And then just to go a little bit deeper on the Senate side, the Senate has not marked up how much they want to put in for the NEA and NEH. I expect no less than level funding at 207, but maybe as high as 211, something in between. I don't even think we'll get shaved off on the Senate side, but it's a forecast, it's an opinion, it's the future. But we'll keep you posted on all that. You're all on our listserv, so you'll be getting that information. I'm gonna, and Linda, I'm just gonna ask if you wanted to add anything, and then I'll look through the last round of questions to ask the last question.
I just think the chat room is very reflective of what's going on in Washington right now with the, polarization, not only between Democrats and Republicans, but within the Democratic Party, between the Congressional Black Caucus, which stands with Biden fully 100%, the base of the party, but others, as I said, frontline members and some centrists that are concerned. I mean, this is a very, very challenging time, I think, for the Democratic Party, and I just hope we get through it. And the decision does rest with Mr. Biden. He has had an impeccable term. I mean, more legislation than any other president, I think, since Lyndon Johnson, frankly, on the domestic side. And internationally, has done a good job too. So he's certainly qualified. And really, I think this is more of just a health issue, and whether folks feel that he is healthy enough to handle it. And he thinks he is. And I think time will tell, just like with anything. I agree with Mr. Clyburn, who says, chill out. Everyone needs to just chill out a little bit. And let's just see how this plays out over the next few weeks. There is time, and then we can sort of go from there. So, I will be honest with everyone on this call. I'm not of one opinion or the other. I've had discussions with my sister who lives in Napa about this, and others I'm close to, and I kind of go back and forth. I'm a big fan of Kamala Harris. I'm a big fan of Joe Biden's. I think he's done a great job. And I'm a big fan, most of all, of America and the arts. And, I hope we can get through this. But democracy, like legislating, it's not pretty. It's ugly. We've had civil wars, revolutions, right? I mean, this is people have, died over these kinds of battles in our history. And so, fortunately, this is a civil discussion right now, and we'll get through it. We're a nation of laws and rules, and we will get through this like we have before. And I'll look forward to being on the other side of it, frankly. But right now, it's very entertaining as a student of politics.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take one more question, and I'm going to quickly respond to one question from Henry, which asks, which strong Republican arts advocates in-house could be helpful with funding issues and timing? And I'm going to ask one of my staff to post in the chat, and then I'll go to a live question in a moment, to post in the chat the legislative update after the floor vote for the NEA that happened in the fall of last year. If you could do that to answer Henry, because what we did was we gave you a link to the roll call vote, and you can see all the Republicans who voted against, and you're voting for a no there. One other thing that's going to be helpful, Henry, is the Arts Action Fund by the end of August will be releasing the Congressional Arts Report Card, where we'll be grading every member of Congress, and those floor votes will be in there. And you'll again see really a nice list going down state by state of which Republicans are getting a thumbs up from us and which ones are not. So look forward to that Congressional Arts Report Card coming in the fall. And then, Lyndon, here's a question that is a very timely question too. That's not legislative, it's not executive, it's judicial. And that is, what impact, if any, do you think the Chevron case would have on a federal cultural agency like the NEA?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's going to have an impact. Already starting to see some decisions at the agencies, but as related to the arts, I don't really have a solid response for that. I mean, the Supreme Court has certainly ruled in favor of Donald Trump's priorities more than once, and this is an example of sort of withdrawing power, from these agencies. I worked at one of these agencies, the Federal Communications Commission, from 1993 until 1997. And so FCC relied on Chevron on rules that were unclear from Congress, like net neutrality, which is a popular issue. So, I don't think it'll help. It's my short answer. But the key is electing candidates and politicians who support the arts and funding them. And, I have two kids in school, and, money is tight. Inflation is still a challenge. These credit card fees are high, with the interest rates being what they are. But I do want to encourage you to stay active and engaged, and whatever you can, if you're confused on which candidates to support, text Nina or myself, give you the track record, because President Johnson did create in 1965, I believe, the NEA and NEH, and the Kennedy Center, for that matter, as an ode to John F. Kennedy, who was an arts advocate. And so if people don't support the arts, the government won't support the arts. And it all starts with you and me. And so I just hope that everyone will do what they can to support the Arts Action Fund, and look at how we spend your money, and to whom we spend your money, and with leaders who, this event we had at the Nancy Hanks lecture with Jeffrey Wright was really impressive, with Jim Clyburn receiving the Congressional Arts Award presented to him by Hakeem Jeffries. And it was a really special moment at the Kennedy Center when Jeffrey Wright, who did not expect to get nominated for an Oscar, had already agreed to speak at the Nancy Hanks lecture. I hope some of y'all will come in for this, next year. It's a really special event at the Kennedy Center. And, Jeffrey was incredible. He was just incredible. And really, I think, an unsung hero in the arts community until now. Now he's very sung because he's getting a lot of accolades for American fiction. But each and every one of you, support the arts in your own way. And so I'm just proud to be associated and affiliated with you. And Nina, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I'm happy for them to do so. I don't know if you want to provide my email address,
But they
or what
can
have you.
always send it to Arts Action Fund at artsusa.org, and I can forward it to you.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And just if I could give my take on the Chevron case as well. Every federal agency has to interpret the laws that Congress gives them, and they either do it through regulations or rulings within how they are going to interpret doing grant making, for instance. So I believe it will impact the National Endowment for the Arts, and that it will call into question someone being able to appeal certain regulations or rulings that they've made in interpreting Congress's laws that have been passed, whether it's a focus on underserved communities, or whether it's a focus on some DEI work or something like that. I think more, I don't think the arts are going to be one of the first to be investigated, but I can tell you that there are conservative think tanks already busy at work, thinking about the ways that they're going to challenge one federal agency after another based on regulations that have been passed. And with that, we're going to conclude today's insider briefing. We'll be back next quarter. And I want to thank you for your active questions and opinions. And we will try to do our best to get a great arts plank in at least the DNC. There was no chance RNC this time. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to those emails about the floor vote.